Nothing says Christmas is coming quite like you brood of vipers. The lectionary gives us these texts that help us think about our season of preparation, but they're not the ones that we might otherwise choose. I have to say, when we read it, I looked over at Pastor Tim and I said, yeah, thanks. You got to preach last week, and I end up with, that was the setup, right? We get to see who John is and all of that, and now we have to hear the words that come out of his mouth, unfortunately. They make us step back a little bit. There are lots of other things that we could hear on a day like today. There are lots of other stories we might want to tell. There are holiday specials we could watch that have wonderful, happy endings where Johnny saves Christmas for everyone because of his heroic efforts. Why stay and listen to this? Why stay and listen to John's words when he has clearly been out in that desert a little too long? He's getting cranky from eating all those locusts. Why? And when you read this story, the same question applies to all these people who have come out to hear John. They've come out into the desert where no normal person belongs, out in the wilderness, and they're coming for something, and what they get is John calling them, taking them to task right away. Why do they stay? Why don't they turn around and walk right on back to the city where they came from? Either in shame or, well, he's no good, and we're going to go find something better. Why are they staying? And when they stay, why do they ask honest, real questions, right? Jesus gets all kinds of snarky questions in the gospel, and here John has said something really difficult, and people say, oh, and what should we do? They're actually sticking with him, and you wonder, why is this happening? As I was thinking about it this week, I thought about the appeal that you might have had to a teacher or a coach who was really tough, but really fair, and who knew you could do better. Maybe you've had one of those in your life if you're lucky. I've had a number, and I think especially of a high school biology teacher, Mr. Lyons, who loved to teach. He loved biology. He thought it was fascinating the way plants made energy out of the sun and the way fungi reproduced and all sorts of things that you might feel like you could get along just fine without knowing, but he loved it. He loved teaching it. He loved making sense of it for everybody, both the people up in front who were, hoping for the very best grades and the people in the back that were mostly back there complaining. He loved to teach. And because you knew that, and because he knew each of his students in that extraordinarily large 35, 38-person classroom by name, and he knew all about us, he had us wrapped around his little finger. He would give these awful tests. They were famously difficult tests. He wrote them himself, and some of it was multiple choice, and you'd think, oh, good, this is going to be the easy part. But no, there were, not A through D, and one of which was all of the above. It was A through H, and somewhere between 0 and 8 of these might fit the description of the question. So there was no guessing. There was no faking your way through this. He would let people bring a cheat sheet to the test. He'd say, you can bring a 3x5 card. Here's everything you need to know. And so, of course, we would dutifully go and write in our very tiniest little script everything we thought we might need to know on the test. At which point it's illegible. You can't really use it, but you have been tricked into studying pretty hard. And so everyone wanted to do well because we knew he loved us and he cared and he managed to pull it out of us. And I wanted to get every point on the test. I was one of those front row kids that, I was interested even before he tried to persuade us. And, I wanted all those points and I wanted all the extra credit. And when he handed a test back to me, had a good grade on it, but he looked me in the eye and he said, if you hand in another exam with handwriting like this, I will not grade it. I will just write an F and hand it back to you. Ooh. I tell you what, in a week I had very lovely cursive. Because the care that I thought I was putting into this was not visible in what I was doing, right? This was terribly important to me, but I'm sloppy. And of course, I'm not a teacher at that point, so I don't realize how difficult I'm making his life. And he said, you can do better. Show that you care. And, yes, it was actually not that hard to say, this is important. Why don't you make the outside match the inside? So I wonder if that might be the case, that these folks are coming out to John, who calls them snakes, who tells them to stop coasting on the name that God gave them, because sometimes accountability is good news. Sometimes accountability is the reminder that there's another way, there's a better way, and there's room for you in that better way. And you don't necessarily have to go out into the desert and eat locusts to be a part of it, or to catch a glimpse of it at least, because someone is coming. Someone is coming who is greater than John. That promise of the prophet in Zephaniah, I will be with them, right? On that day it will be said to Jerusalem, the Lord is in your midst. That promise is going to be walking around in Jesus. And while John is right in identifying the problem, that God's people are not models of faithfulness, God's people are not showing the world this way of God's, John hasn't quite seen the whole picture of the solution yet, because no one could have imagined the one who is coming is going to flip the script. It's not going to be about us trying and failing to be faithful. God is always the one who is faithful beyond imagining, and Jesus will be faithful to us all the way to the cross, to the resurrection. Jesus is going to be the fruitful tree that's going to be chopped down to put an end to our assumptions that killing is the way that God solves problems, that killing is the way that we solve problems. Jesus, in his life and in his death and in his resurrection, is going to anchor our connection to God, not in our ability to bear fruit, but in God's life that is so abundant that there is enough. That is what will keep us together. God coming to be with us. So people are coming to John because he correctly notices the problem, and because they're getting a whiff that there's good news on the way. Despite all of these words of John's, the good news is that we have been redeemed. And as God's redeemed children, we're welcomed into this new way, this other way of being. So John says, bear fruit worthy of repentance. Let your outsides match the insides God has given you. That's not expecting us to be crucified and rise. Jesus has done that. It's not expecting us to create a perfectly magical Christmas or to be the hero who saves everyone's holidays. John isn't even asking these people to do what he does, right? You would think that John's answer to what should we do would be, well, come follow me out here in the desert. We've got plenty of bugs to eat, and you will no longer have to participate in the systems that are so troublesome in the world. You can just opt out of the economy, you can opt out of politics, you can opt out of the power structure and come live out here, and we're going to quit everything. And he doesn't say that at all. John says, great, go home. Oh, all right, you have a coat. I see that you are clothed. If you have anything extra, you ought to share it. You who are a tax collector, yeah, everyone loves to hate you. You know what? Just be fair. Don't steal, right? Just be fair. You soldiers who have this tendency to walk around with a swagger and to hold the pommel of your sword while you're asking for a favor, knock it off. Be kind. Don't be a bully. Share. Be fair. Be kind. Loving your neighbor should keep you plenty busy, right? Loving our neighbor should keep us plenty busy. The crowd that came out to see John lived like we do in the city, in the towns, in the marketplace, and he sends them back to bear the fruit of God's love in their lives. Sending them back means he's sending them to produce apples, right? He's sending them to produce something simple. For them, it would be figs, but I can't grow figs here. So he's sending us to produce apples, not passion fruit, not mangoes, nothing exotic, just the things that are supposed to grow in our lives. Paul says, rejoice, let your gentleness be known, do not worry, rest in God's peace, don't hurt others to make you feel more secure. Loving your neighbor should keep you plenty busy and be that outward sign of God's grace at work in us. When I was in college, I worked in a care center, and we were mostly caring for folks with various Alzheimer's and other sorts of cognitive differences that were not quite to the level of skilled nursing. So we were not paid to the level of skilled or partially skilled nursing. We were people who helped folks dress and bathe and got paid about $5.50 an hour, $6.50 if you had been around a long time and were really a contributor. And, you know, there were plenty of people, I think, who felt like, I'm paid $5.50 an hour, I'm going to put out $5.50 an hour's worth of effort. And considering the system that they were stuck in, I can understand the thought. But Anna was a little different. Anna was like most of the folks that I was working with, not a native English speaker. She did not come to the U.S. with documents, and in fact, she didn't have a whole lot of English at all to interact with the folks that we were caring for. And where other people maybe found ways to cut corners or to let the language barrier be a bit of a barrier to human connection, because I've been on the other side of that. I know how easy that is. She always found a way to make a little connection. There was music on, she was dancing. There was, hair to be done. She was, telling people how beautiful they are. You know what? You don't have to speak English to know when someone's telling you you're beautiful, right? There's something in their eyes. And, we are sent into the lives that we're given to live out this new way, bearing fruit worthy of repentance, bearing fruit that matches the gift that we have been given in Jesus Christ. Loving our neighbor should keep us plenty busy. We're not called to save ourselves. Jesus has done that. But boy, when we bear fruit in our lives, when we follow John, not necessarily into the desert, but in pointing to that good news, things happen. Most of us are here because there was somebody, many somebodies in our lives who bore that sort of fruit, kindness and patience and gentleness and fairness, all of those little things that don't get movies made about them maybe, but are signs of God's love at work in our lives and in our worlds. Thanks be to God.